Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. What a way to honor Gordon Parks. Gordon would be so proud to know that his vision brought all of us together. Yeah. In this world that we live in today, photography and the arts has the ability to bring people together. This is truly a great day in Pleasantville. We need this right now. There's so much love in the room. My desire to get into photography is really rooted in wanting to document love and joy. You know what I mean? I wanted to create a counter narrative to so much of the negative images I've been seeing throughout my life. So as a photographer, having the wonderful gift of vision, I wanted to use my vision to create joy, to document joy and love that I was seeing every day. I was introduced to photography at the age of 15 years old as a young man growing up in Brooklyn. I fell in love with it. It opened up my third eye and allowed me to see things that I needed to see and document. I look at it as a form of alchemy. To have the ability to freeze time and motion is such a divine gift. And I want to contribute to history and culture. I'm a child of the 1960s. I grew up during a time period where most of the images I saw was of civil unrest and war. And it troubled me as a young child. I found comfort in studying Life magazine as a young child. Unlike today when we have the internet, Life magazine was my gateway to a larger world. And through Life magazine, I was introduced to the work of Gordon Parks and so many others, not even realizing it was Gordon Parks. I just saw these incredible images that told stories, and it captivated me. As I look at today, and I was just meditating on this conversation, I went to Gordon Parks' book, Visions in the Mirror, Vision in the Mirror, and I decided on, we call today's mathematics the 20th, so I looked at the 20th chapter of that book. And what was so deep about that, he speaks about his son David and Muhammad Ali, and the relationship between the two of them. My actual introduction to Gordon Parks came when I was in the military in 1978, when I read a book that David Parks wrote called GI Diary. And David Parks was Gordon Parks' son who went to Vietnam. And it's a powerful book about his experience in Vietnam and his relationship with his father. And it's through that book that inspired me to want to learn more about Gordon Parks. But I don't want to go on. I posted something on social media that I told about suicide, so it's interesting what somebody had wrote me, and you just never know the impact that it has. So, and I didn't even know this. Wow. I lost my big brother 40 years ago because older people in my family didn't understand this. And what I wrote was, if somebody reaches out to you to vent, take time and listen. You might be all they got. So again, they responded by saying, I lost my big brother 40 years ago because the older people in my family didn't understand this. So you just never know the impact that you have by what you post. You know, I just had a feeling to address suicide this morning. Because we deal with a lot of it. People just don't speak about that enough. And it amazes me the amount of people I know who've lost their children to suicide, and it just came suddenly, and they pretty much in shock behind that. So I just felt the need to address it by speaking about, I found something online about when people reach out to you to vent, take time to hear them out. And someone just told me to put that out there, and I'm really surprised with the responses that I'm getting so far. And just that thought came to me to address that today. With a song by the Four Tops, Reach Out. So I like to attach music to some of my statements. So not only you're seeing it, but now you're hearing a vibe to create a balance and spark conversation at the same time too. So I'm grateful for social media for that. So I'm able to get all these different ideas out every day. And I constantly feed my page with just ideas that I have within inside me that I need to just, share. And you just never know the impact that you have on a person. So
How many people would you say have you lost in time, or recently, or?
Recently, I say between 2018 and now, I've lost well over 200 people, 200. And most of the men, to me, they died prematurely, of diabetes, heart attacks. And sadly, a lot of them were single, and they found them like maybe days later decomposing. A lot of good friends. I have a stack of photographs here of so many. I can't really go through it because it's probably very emotional for me, but this is just a handful of people who I've lost
over time, which I'll share with you. And every photograph is a story. You know, a young daughter got murdered here. You know, my brother Kev, Tito Puente. So I've just been going through my photo albums, just taking out images of people who passed away. My good brother Malik, you know, who I grew up with, he passed away on my birthday. You know, young brother here, Email, you know, he died of leukemia. My brother Black Star, good brother, he passed away back in, I believe, April. I spoke to him on the phone maybe for like 3 hours and he would be dead the next week. My partner's mother, Malik, Kev, Johnny, Art Bark, Shanique, Pork, you know, brother's been going so long, kind of like started to forget names, you know, so many, but all these people have just passed. So I've been just gathering all of the photographs, all of these faces. You know, Dave Valentine, Kim was murdered, brother was murdered, she died of AIDS, you know, legendary photographer Bruce Wright, Stanley Tarantine, my cousin Angelique died last year, Ben Bella, great artist. This brother was murdered in the presence of his two daughters. My man Skip, Divine, Trev died this year, good brother. I posted this picture only to find out that she died. You know, my man Malik again, you know, brother Bubba, you know, very known brother from Prospect Park, passed away. He was an icon, a brother that was doing a lot for the community, especially in Brooklyn. Brother Blessed, Gordon Parks, and it goes on and on. You know, this is just all the photographs. My brother L, and it's just deep. Ricky Powell. So photographs really matter. Illage, another good friend, died this year. Two brothers I met, you know, that I connected when I came home from the Army, Ramel and Jameek, they both passed the same year, last year. Man, Javier, Guy, it just goes on and on. It's just crazy as I'm looking at it right now. It's just so many photographs. Brother Ashford, Brother Monk, found out that brother passed away, Mary Ellen Mark. You know, and this goes on and on. You know, young sister here committed suicide. So you just never know the power of the photographs. And what's interesting too is how my pictures are serving as obituaries. So here my two brothers right here, Ramel and Divine was my barber. And what I'm finding in so many cases is that my photographs are becoming obituaries to most of the people who passed away. And what makes this so special is that they're looking at me. You know what I mean? So I'm happy that I was able to preserve the legacy through my work. And even in this photograph right here, you know, this is for my 50th birthday celebration. My cousin died this year. Ramel died last year. Malik died this year. So there's only one brother standing, my man T right here, you know, who did 20 years with me in corrections. You know, Malik was in the Marine Corps. You know, Ramel worked for probation. My cousin Sonny was in the Navy. And these brothers all died, you know, very young. Malik died of health conditions. Ramel died of health conditions. Sonny died of health conditions. So a lot of it, to me, it could be prevented. And that's why throughout my life, you know, when I used to be out there in the streets, you know, one of the things I spoke about was goals and aspirations, but I also spoke about the importance of health and nutrition, that we have to eat to live. You know, we have to be very mindful of the things that we put in the body, because they could either preserve ourselves, preserve us, or take us out. And in so many cases of the people who passed away throughout, you know, these past 2 years, but really throughout the past 40 years of my life, in many cases it's been related to health. You know, a handful have been murdered, but most people died prematurely due to the decisions they made in terms of diet. So I'm a stickler when it comes down to that, you know, putting the right things in our body. You know, I was an advocate against cigarette smoke because I saw what cigarette and alcoholism did to my family. You know, my father battled with that, you know, because of the trauma that he had grew up with. And a lot of my uncles battled with addiction as well. And I take it because when I re-examined the time period in which they came up, during the 1940s and 50s and 60s, they encountered a lot of hardships. And they were really beaten down through the racism and discrimination. And many of them found comfort in alcohol, you know, to try to ease some of their pain. So I grew up seeing a lot of that. And I think as I grew older, I became an advocate against it because I saw what it did to my own family. My father, was a heavy smoker, and he died at 57 years old, and it could have been prevented. And all my uncles died pretty much in their 40s and early 50s. So in witnessing that and going to all of these funerals early on, I was out there in the streets using my voice to speak about the importance of just eating right, and just taking care of ourselves, because we have to fulfill our purpose. And sadly today, with all the people I'm losing, it's just could have been prevented. And the sad part about it, most of the people who passed away in my circle, they had children. So now their children are left suffering, trying to balance out life, without having that father or mother. And a lot of these situations would be prevented. So I'm going to continue to use my platform to speak about the importance of health and nutrition, because we need it more now than ever before. We are getting consumed with so much of the fast food out here. We got to go back to the basics, and having meals cooked from the heart. I'm so blessed to have a wife, a queen, who makes fresh meals for me every day. And she puts that special ingredient in every meal, and that's love. You're not going to get that when you go to fast food. You're just going to get something fast that's made. There's a lot of chemicals and preservatives in it, and it's taking us out. So we have to be mindful of that.
How did you pick up the camera?
Well, I grew up in an environment where I was surrounded by photographs throughout my life. Coming into this world, there was always photography books that were with center stage within each family. So as a young child, I grew up looking at my father's photo albums. I was fascinated with it because I realized, in looking at these photographs, it gave me a glimpse into my father's world, and at the same time, the history of our family. So I was fascinated with that, to see pictures of my father when he was young. And I don't know how old I was at the time, but pretty much in my single digits. As maybe 5 years old, I was able to comprehend this here. And I was always drawn towards these photo albums that we had within our home. So it's at that point that I start to see the value of photography and preserving family history. And I had my uncle, who was in World War II, my Uncle Charlie. He used to always photograph the family during family reunions. And we would always see him taking photographs. And then around the holidays, he would gather us all around the family, and he would do slideshows. And we would be fascinated with seeing these images that my uncle took of us throughout the many years. And that always intrigued me. And that was one of the big treats during the holiday season, to look at these slides, to turn out the lights and have a slide projector and just see all of these images of us during different stages of our life. So at that point, I start to see the value of photography. And then what happened to me later on, about when I was 9 years old, my father had this book on our coffee table in the house by Leonard Freed, and it was signed. And it wasn't personalized, it was just a signed book. So out of all the books that he had, it was this one that really caught my eye, because all the other books was pretty much in his library. So I picked this book up and I started going through it. And I was fascinated behind the images that I would see. And one of the first image that opens up the book is a black soldier in Germany during the 1960s. 1960s, the year I was born. And what drew me to this photograph was the fact that I had two uncles in Germany around the same time. So first of all, I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the whole composition of it. You have a black soldier during the early 60s. There's a lot of racism going on in America. And then you have a white soldier in the Jeep. So this drew my eye to kind of see the value of photography. Then it goes on into a situation at a prison, Angola prison. So now I'm being introduced to jail and racism in America, and I'm reading it, and I'm seeing, not only I'm looking at the photographs, but I'm really studying the words, and I'm looking at words that I didn't quite understand. So I remember getting a dictionary and having a dictionary by my side with a pen and paper, and I'm started to look at the words and start to look for the definitions to better understand what was going on. It was in this book that I saw the word colored for the very first time. I didn't know what colored meant. I remember my mother might, in conversation, talk about colored people, and I would go to find out that colored meant black people. So I'm learning a whole new language in here. I learned the word nigger in this book for the first time. I've never seen it in writing, but in this book I saw the word nigger for the first time. I saw racism and discrimination and signs and the Confederate flag, and I saw the word rape for the first time in this book. So I became really fascinated with everything that was going on in this particular publication, and it seemed like it was really tailor-made for me to pick up this book as a young black kid, black in America. So it allowed me to time travel out of my project in Brooklyn, and through the lens of Leonard Freed, I was able to see what racism looked like, because my parents never really talked about it before. But it's through this book here I saw the signs of discrimination. You know, I saw the word hate, and I realized that there's a really challenging world out there that's awaiting me. And it's very interesting with this photograph here, because I was a few years younger than this young man, but in looking at him, I was able to identify. You know, as a young boy in Harlem, the picture's called Muscle Man, and I saw images of myself for the first time. Other than the family photo albums, it's in this book that I saw photographs of other black people that weren't in my family. And I'm seeing the South for the first time, and poverty and different conditions. And I'm being introduced again to racism, you know, in this one book. So it would change my life. And throughout the many years, I would reference this book. I would keep going back to it. And in 1980, when I came home from the military, and my father saw my interest in photography, he presented this book for me to look at, to study this particular form of documentary photography. And I did. And it would go on to really help me shape my own personal vision. And what's interesting about this particular book is that I never had a chance to meet Leonard Freed, because he had died, you know, I believe in the late 1990s, early 2000s. But I had a chance to meet his wife, Bridget, and I was able to go to his home. And it's through his wife, Bridget, that I learned that she developed all of these photographs. She did all of the printing of these images, and she broke all these photographs down to me. You know, all the history of these photographs and her husband's legacy. And it was really touching to go to the home that he built. And one of the things she did, I got to find this photograph in here that really changed my life. It's an incredible backstory to this image, and how it would really help to inform my personal practices, and how this thing has come full circle after all of these many years. But it was the first time I'm really seeing black and white photography. And it's Leonard really did his job, and he never had an idea, the impact that this one book would have on my personal life. You know, one book would change my life. And what I found interesting about it too is that Leonard Freed lived in the same neighborhood that I grew up in East Flatbush, in the same particular neighborhood, the same area that I documented so well over the many years of my life. Leonard Freed came from that same area, and he went to the same high school as me many years before. I believe he went in the 1940s. I went to Samuel J. Tilden High School in the 1970s. So we went to the same high school, lived in the same neighborhood. It was this photograph that really caught my eye. Out of all the images in the book, this photograph really grabbed me. Here you have a member of the Nation of Islam holding up Muhammad Speaks newspaper, "We must have justice." And I'm wondering, what does that mean? And below it, you have a policeman using his dog to attack a black protester in Birmingham, Alabama. So I'm looking at this image, "We must have justice." I'm looking at all of this going on right here, and it drew my eye. So what makes this so interesting, this particular photograph, is that just a few years ago, Bridget Freed, when I went to her house, she would pass on this particular photograph to me as a gift. This is the original photograph that was used in the book. And for my birthday, she would pass on this photograph to me as a special gift. The original photograph signed by Leonard Freed. Now, this was so touching to me because it brought the whole journey full circle. Here, as a young 9-year-old boy, I would see this photograph, never meeting the photographer. Later on, having an opportunity to go to his house and even do a couple of exhibitions with his work, through his wife Bridget. And then for my birthday, not only would she give me this photograph, but she also passed on the other photograph to me as a birthday gift, which she calls Muscle Boy, which is signed by her husband as well. So this has allowed me to see the importance of my journey over these many years, and the power of photography, and how one book can change the life of an individual. And it is my hope that my work could do the same thing. You know, now that as an author, I produce books and I sign them, And I hope that some young man or woman will see a signed copy on their coffee table and want to explore photography more based on what I've done. So I'm very grateful for my father for turning me on to the work of Leonard Freed. I'm grateful for Leonard Freed having the vision to document what he saw. Because what's interesting about the first photograph in this book that really inspired Leonard Freed to actually come back and photograph Black America is that he saw all the injustice that Black people were going through in America. And here you have a Black man preserving over in Europe, preserving the democracy over there, but meanwhile coming back to America and being discriminated against. So when Leonard Freed, a white man, saw this, he was compelled to come back to America and to document injustice. So I applaud him for that. So that book had great impact on my life. And this is another book that really captivated me. And I remember my father used to collect a lot of books back in the days. And I remember looking at one of his publications and seeing the name Don McCullen. I said, I know that name. And I've seen his work before. So I remember going to a bookstore and I saw this book. Very first photography book I ever picked up, Hearts of Darkness. And this book introduced me to war and poverty around the world. And I was always fascinated by war photography through my father's work, but this book really introduced me to a war from a broader sense. All the different proxy wars that were going on throughout the world, from in Greece to Belfast to Nigeria, Vietnam. And I saw war up close and personal through the eyes of these war photographers. So it's really through war photography that helped me see how violent the world that we were living in. Because mind you now, I came up during the 1960s, and two major things were going on during my time period. And that was the war in Vietnam and the anti-war movement was taking place. So, watching the evening news, there was always footage of the war in Vietnam. So I was drawn to that early on in my life, wanting to know what was going on. And I remember young men in my community in Red Hook being drafted and going to war, some not coming back. So this war really captivated me, to see death and suffering, to try to understand what's going on here. Why are we fighting a war? And we're supposed to be a Christian nation, and we were taught thou shalt not kill, but what are we doing over there, involved in this war? And the more I studied it, the more it became really deep to me, because I started to realize that in Vietnam in particular, they had fought the French and they fought the Japanese. And then I'm learning the word communism for the first time, and Viet Cong, and why do we feel the need to fight them? Of course, they have a particular way of life. They've chosen to be communists or Buddhists. And it just produced a lot of curiosity in me as a young child. I remember the very first movie my father ever took me to see, I was about 9 years old again, was a movie called The Green Beret featuring John Wayne. And it was the first propaganda film that dealt with the war in Vietnam, purely propaganda. John Wayne was the hero that was going to save the day. But I remember watching this movie with my father, and I was really perplexed with it all. Like, again, what are we doing in Vietnam? And it produced more and more curiosity to the point where I went on a damn near 50-year journey studying everything I could about the war in Vietnam to better understand it. And it's through photographs that I started to kind of like get a better understanding of it. The horrors of war, the death and destruction, the innocent people that were caught in between through this one book right here, So I'm very grateful for all the war photographers. And just recently, I received the Lucy Award, and it's one of the honors of my career, because very rarely do I ever receive an award, but I received this a few weeks ago, and I'm really honored. It was for for the field of documentary photography. But one of the highlights of that evening for me was when I had an opportunity to meet the famous war photographer James Natway. And he's an incredible man who has covered so many wars around the world. And he was there. He had been honored before, but I had a chance to meet him and tell him the impact that his work has had on me, and to thank him for his contributions, to put his life on the line, to show not only me, but the world, the horrors of war. And I would use his documentary, War Photographer, as a teaching tool when I would go into the schools. So to meet him and thank him, it really brought so much full circle. I met another photographer whose work was very inspired me over the years, Steve McCurry. You know, and his documentation of people from around the world, from war to children in particular. So that was one of the highlights of this year for me, to actually meet individuals who've inspired me over time. And just yesterday, I received an email from Stephen Shabazz, who produced his book, Women of the Black Panther Party, but he is best known for his documentation of Black Panthers in general. And I absolutely love this book, and I appreciate the work that he's done over time. But to my surprise, Stephen had reached out to me, and he wanted to make a trade with me. And I was surprised that he would approach me and want to trade me one of my photographs for one of his images. So I said, wow, what an honor. So I decided what I was going to do. I asked Stephen, I said, this is the photograph I want right here. And he agreed. So he's going to get it printed for me. And I think that what's so deep about that, I'm going to put that right next to this particular photograph here. You know, so what a blessing to be able to connect with someone whose work I admire, and to even know that he wants to trade one of my photographs for his. So I immediately said, this is the one I want, because I knew it would compliment this one. And what's so interesting about both these photographs here, I was so intrigued with the publications that an old friend gave me a stack of Muhammad Speaks newspapers. And another friend gave me a stack of Black Panther newspapers that I have here as well. So it's amazing how all this is really coming full circle for me right now, and in a way that I would have never have imagined. So I have those publications somewhere around here. And one of the things I'm doing now is I'm organizing all of my work. And these are some of the portfolios that I'm looking to get into museums. This particular body work, being that we're on the conversation of war, this is dedicated to civil servants, particularly veterans. And this is an original Tuskegee Airman, and I photographed this at the Veterans Day Parade a few years ago. And this is Julius Freeman. I believe he passed away. But what a blessing now as a photographer to document some of the people whose work I've seen, whose contribution to military service I've seen over the many years. So this particular body of work is dedicated to veterans. And here you have Vietnam veterans here. You have a combat wounded. You know, and I was really fascinated. You know, here I am, I'm growing up looking at these men going to and from war. And now some 30, 40 years later, I'm in a position to photograph them. So this has allowed me to bring my journey full circle. And this is a very important body of work that I've never really shown before. And I've been doing it for at least 40 years. Here you have a wounded veteran from, I believe, Afghanistan. A young girl at a Navy graduation at Annapolis. And it's just important stories to be told, because many of these men, they went to war at 19, 20 years old. And I always wanted to know who they were. So after all these years, I'm able to meet them and learn more about their journey and experience. And this has been really amazing for me. I would have never imagined in my life that, you know, I would be placed on this path to kind of like bring balance into my life. Here's a brother, Ernie Panicoli, that was very instrumental in helping me understand the world of photography. He's a renowned photographer. He's documented the early stages of hip hop. Ernie is a Vietnam veteran. He served in the Navy. And this is his son, Chris. And what's so deep about this particular day, Ernie was really troubled that his son had enlisted in the military. You know, he's really bothered behind that. And not only did he enlist in the military, but he enlisted it to be in a elite unit, the U.S. Army Rangers. And Ernie was bothered behind that. He used to write me all the time, and he was really pained with his son going to fight in wars that he felt were unjust. But on this day, Ernie had told me that his son was coming over and he was preparing to be shipped out. So I immediately got my camera and I traveled out to Jersey and I caught this photograph, because we didn't know what the future was going to be. You could look in Ernie's eyes, you could see the pain of the possibility of losing his son. And thankfully his son returned home and he's all right. But to me, this is a very important photograph of a father with his son. This is the deep image here that was taken at the Veterans Day Parade. Here you have a soldier who served in Vietnam, and he has this patch here that represents the 82nd Airborne, and it's on his right shoulder, and that represents he was combat, because the patch is always on the right shoulder if you went to war. And the light blue braid represents the infantry. And the green tab represents he was a non-commissioned officer. So here you have this gentleman here standing next to this gentleman here with the peace sign, which alludes me to believe that he was a protester against the war. So here you have the red, white, and blue here, and the red, white, and blue here, and two older gentlemen that are now involved in conversation. So this is one of my most important photographs I took out of the Vietnam War to show two people from two different perspectives coming together in conversation. And what I found interesting, over the many years, I would always see them at the Veterans Day Parade together. So despite their different views of the war, they still have a friendship with each other. This is the black veteran here who served in both the Korean War and the Vietnam War in an all-black airborne unit called the Triple Nickel, which represents the 555 airborne unit. And this is another body of my work here, dealing with the civil servants, the invisible people that we don't often see. Here you have some new recruits who are going into the correction department. And here you have recruits going into the fire department. This is at the African American Day Parade in Harlem. And for me, going to document that is very important because it allowed me an opportunity to show a side of our community that we don't often see. And that's the pride and dignity. And I've documented this in the spirit of James Van Der Zee. Again, Vietnam veterans here. Brother just recently passed away here. He was an icon. He was a photographer. Brother Gatlin. He was from Harlem. And just other faces of veterans. And so my next big project I'm going to do for Photoville is a veterans project. You know, and I came with the idea last night. It's very interesting. I couldn't sleep last night. So I came up with this vision as a proposal for Photoville for 2024. And what I want to do this time around, I've curated 3 shows there already. But for this new show, what I want to do is have photographers who are in the military produce a body of work to be exhibited, to give them a platform. And I'm really excited behind that. So I know about 4 photographers served during the Vietnam War. And then I know some younger photographers that served both in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm going to bring them together in an exhibition for next year. So I'm going to develop that proposal this week. And I'm really excited behind giving a platform for veterans. And again, other veterans here. You know, these are some young brothers from the 82nd Airborne who I met at during the end of the Gulf War. Here you have some soldiers from the 10th Mountain Division or combat infantry that just returned from Afghanistan. You know, this is a different side of my work that people don't often see. This was made in the spirit of James Van Der Zee as well. And then I have other bodies of work that I'm best known for, which is really important. And this is work that's important to me. This is I call this The Gathering. And this is in Prospect Park back in 1995, a place I went to quite often. Prospect Park is about 585 acres. I call it my oasis in Brooklyn. I spent a lot of time in that park, and it was a place I would go to escape the concrete jungle. And in Prospect Park, we had a number of lakes and hills, and it gave me an opportunity to decompress and kind of like slow down a little bit. So this is just a wide range of images that I've documented over the many years. And all of them are very close to my heart. You know, this one I call, what's the name of it? Can't remember the title I gave this one right here. You know, but prepping for the new generation. Here you have an ROTC cadet, and you have these junior cadets in the background looking up to this young man. And I saw this at the Veterans Day Parade, which I found very interesting. You know, of course, the young brothers in the neighborhood is something that's always very important to me to document. You know, and just different things I've seen carrying my camera over the many years. Both these images was made in the 1980s. And one of the gifts that my father told me is carry your camera everywhere you go. Always have it, you know, out, no cap on, you know, have it set properly. And it's through that practice I was able to capture these. So this is actually the accompanying catalog showcasing a few of the images from the exhibition. And what was important for me, this book came out a few months ago. My cousin passed away in April, and I wanted to just dedicate it to him. So this is a photograph of him to honor my cousin who passed away. You know, he was my first best friend and my first cousin. We were the same age. We both went in the military. We both had dogs, and we were tight. I spoke to him on Monday, and he was dead on Wednesday. So I decided, to dedicate the book to him. So many of these images, all these images were actually in the exhibition, faces and places on the steps. And it's a series of images from the early 80s into the 2000s. Sisters here. And I helped to design the book. Here you have Luis Mendez again with one of his students. The young brothers here from back in the days. Another photograph I just found after 40 years. A lot of these images have never been seen before. Father and son, another negative, just rediscovered, never published before. I love doing books because once the work is in a book, it's cataloged and I could put the negatives away. This is a fashion shoot I did with some brothers on a Soho area, again, Japan. And it's something now, Tower Record doesn't exist anymore. And these are both rappers right here. Spear, and sister's name escapes me right now, but she's a renowned Japanese artist. This is a really deep photograph right here. I actually met her before I photographed her in the spot here. I met her at Penn Station one day, and she had this red mohawk, and this was a tall woman. I said, I gotta photograph this sister. And I approached her during rush hour, gave her my business card, and she reached out to me. And we did this photo shoot one day, and I took her to this lot, which I thought would be really appropriate. And I captured this photograph right here. And it's really iconic. I did photograph punk rockers back in the days, but it was just something about her look that I had to capture. This is a deep photograph here. These are my students in Toronto, Luis and Tasha. And I met them when I was doing the workshops there. We became really close friends. And we found this old abandoned car one day, and we just went there. We created this image right here. And we still have a friendship to this day. That was taken about in 2008. This is my way of documenting the Caribbean Day Parade. And I've documented this extensively over the past 40 years in addition to the Puerto Rican Day Parade. Again, the element of love, where you can't go wrong. This is in Prosper Park, and I call this the art of love. This is a renowned Haitian artist who's done these carvings throughout Prosper Park. His name escapes me right now. He's still living, and he would take these damaged trees and create this beautiful artwork. This is an image that I made in Thailand, back in 2000, I believe, late 1990s. Another negative I found after all these years, my man Sha Kim. Best friends and sisters is very important to me. I actually photographed these young women in 1980. And this photograph was taken around in the late 1990s. So I photographed them over time. Evelyn and Edie. And two sisters from the neighborhood right here. Just everyday people. That's where my lens was trained upon. Just regular individuals. Mark Jackson, when he was playing for the Knicks. Group of Masons. And this is a beautiful photograph I just found. I wanted this to actually be the cover. This would probably be the cover of one of my books as well. Because it's like the other photograph with a young boy, no standing any time. You have this young brother, and it has a sign, walk. And this photograph was made in Savannah, Georgia. It's very important for me to have different cultures in my work. I don't want to be limited to just one particular community. I like to show diversity in all of my work. So here you have these young Dominican sisters. And what's special about this photograph, when I posted it on social media, Instagram, they all reached out to me. So they're still best friends to this day. And they're so grateful that I was able to capture this moment in time and just freeze it for future generations. Another negative I just found after 40 years. And just some of my newer work that's never been seen before. Here you have a young mother about to go to work as the father babysits. So it's always a joy to introduce new work into book projects. Another classic I just found. So it's amazing to be able to go through old negatives and rediscover images that you have no memory of whatsoever. And this photograph was made about 1982. And going through old negatives, I found it and I was blown away with the beauty of this photograph here and what it meant. So it's something to look at negatives in the time travel, which I'll share with you in a few minutes here. One of my recent works here, a baptism in Harlem, and just be able to capture this young man in his zone, looking outward. You know, this is a photograph I call Remembering Malcolm. And this went on to be one of my iconic photographs as well, which graced the cover of a magazine. And it's not often I get those opportunities, but now I'm able to do that right now occasionally. So I call this one again Remembering Malcolm. And this is a photograph that's reflective of what Gordon Parks did, going back to his Image of the Nation of Islam. So to show that influence that his work has had on me. And here it is right here. So it's my way of, you know, it just shows you how an image could impact you subconsciously, and then when the opportunity comes to create, you can create it again. So this photograph means a lot to me. I call it front and center. This is an interesting photograph. I saw them on the train and I followed them, you know, for a number of stops, and I knew I had to get this photograph right here. And to my surprise, they gave it to me. And what's so interesting here, you have a young man, he has his face tattooed on his arm. And I just had to capture this photograph right here. I call this big brother, little brother. Yeah. Two professors right here, you know, Sister Noel Thread and Yaba Bay. Two good friends of mine, and they're both professors. And I did this for a book project they were working on called The Color Complex, I believe, dealing with race in America. And here you have a sister from Ghana, African, and here you have a sister from Haiti. And you deal with the shades and racism that we have and self-hatred. And I really applaud them for addressing that in this incredible book that they produced. Matter of fact, the book is called One Drop. And they both collaborate on that book to address the issue of race and self-hatred within our community. This is a series, an ongoing series I've been working on with young people and their animals, or just people in general with their animals. Good brother here by the name of Prince, and he passed away. So now that's an iconic image. This is brother Trevor right here, and he lived in my neighborhood. This is actually in the East Flatbush section of Brooklyn, and it's a print I actually just found not too long ago, the negative. And then when I processed it, it blew me away because I'm looking at my old block, Church Avenue. I'm looking at the old Westons that used to be here. And then I'm learning more about who Trevor was. I met him when I first came home from the military, and I didn't know his background. I didn't know that Trev was in the Marine Corps, you know, and I didn't know that he was a prominent boxer and a highly respected individual in the community. And then I would find out that he died in a very violent car accident where he burned to death. And what's so deep about his journey is that through social media, Instagram, I connected with his son, who looks just like him, who never met his father because he was in his mother's womb. And I was able to tell him about his father, and more importantly, I gave him a copy of this image of his father. And that meant a world to him, to be able to now pass on the images to the children of their loved ones that are no longer here. So it's just something that both these brothers here lived in my neighborhood, and both of them died at a very young age. This is a self-portrait of myself when I worked in corrections. And it's a very rare photograph of me in my locker room, photographed with my partner, and I'm in the mirror with my camera. And it's a very rare photograph here. You know, I was fortunate to have a bathroom, a weight room. I bought my flowers to try to create a positive atmosphere in the midst of so much negativity. When I first came home from the military, one of the places that I revisited was my old community in Red Hook. And I focused my lens on a lot of the children. And I call this period a time before crack, a time of innocence. Here you have these beautiful children just playing with a shopping cart, and you just see the innocence, you know. And during this time period, crack was on the horizon. And so many of them were impacted by having to grow up in a community that was devastated heavily by crack cocaine. And like so many of my other images in this book, this is a negative I just found after so many years. Because one of the things that's happened since COVID, I've been going through a lot of my negatives, and I'm covering so many gems. And this is one of them. So this photograph means the world to me. It's never been published before, and it's close to my heart. And what's so beautiful about this, through social media, I'm able to put this on the Red Hook alumni page and reconnect with so many of these kids here who are now in their 40s. I have such a love for children and the innocence of them. It's a very different time, and people are really apprehensive about people photographing children. But whenever the opportunity presents itself, I try to, because there's just something innocent about them. This is some of my fashion work. You know, I grew up on Delancey Street on the Lower East Side, where I did a lot of my shopping back in the days. So I do a lot of my shoots in that area, you know, because that space means a lot to me. And fashion photography is something that's very close to my heart. So this is an image I took not too long ago of a couple. Again, the inspiration of the work of Leonard Freed, you know, and the juxtaposition is something that I notice about his work. So this is a very interesting photograph right here. This is taken at a rally, actually. And I noticed this aesthetic gentleman, you know, who totally looked out of place. And he was wandering from bench to bench at this crowded event. And I just started to study him. And I knew that something was off about this individual. So as I studied him and my camera was properly set, this gentleman here was sitting here. And to my shock, he went and sat right down next to him. And I zoomed over there, had my camera ready, and I caught this moment right here. And the original title of this photograph was WTF. Then I decided to call it When Two Worlds Meet. This is a very deep photograph here too, because again, I try to tell stories, spontaneous moments. This is a body of my work that's posed, and then there's a body of work of mine that is just spontaneous. This is actually at an art opening, a photography exhibition at the Schomburg. And Ajay Collins is a highly respected photographer that was taught by Gordon Parks. And here he is outside the institution. And I just anticipated something was going to happen. And I caught this particular moment here. And I titled it 4 Shades of Gray, where you have these 4 individuals with all gray hair having a conversation. It's a very important photograph of mine, showcasing some of my new work. Again, some of the unposed images of just walking around the streets of Harlem. This is my new vision. So much of my work in the 80s was just portraits, asking permission. As time progressed, it's just moments that I saw and I just felt the need to just capture it. This is one of the first photographs I've ever made that actually won an award. And this is for a campaign that I did for Umbro, the clothing line Umbro. And very interesting day right here. These are all actual models. And they came up with this idea on New York swag. So they had the different cultures photographed, or they wanted me to photograph in their items. So here we in Little Italy, and I have this particular image. And what's so interesting about this day, I'm reading the New York Times early that morning, and I realized that the police department busted 2 mafia families, one in New Jersey and one in New York, the day before. And here we are doing this photo shoot in Little Italy, and you got these guys looking like mobsters. And I'll never forget, as I'm photographing them in the area, a police car stopped, was going by and it stopped, and it had to back up and it's looking at this photo shoot, and it's like I call it the takeover. So it's almost like one family got busted one night, and the next day these guys are doing a photo shoot, and it really baffled the police to know what was going on. And when you look at these guys, they all look authentic, but they were actually just models posing, you know, for this company right here. This photograph won me first prize for best advertisement. We have these Eastern Stars, and this was taken in Brooklyn a few years ago. And with this photograph, pretty much the same. I'm in Morocco, and you have a young girl coming out of the bakery, and you have the gentleman going to the bakery. You know, some of the fashion work I've done over the years. This is a photograph I made in Japan. Again, just everyday life. You know, back in the old days, I always carried a photo album with me, and I use it as a conversation piece to help people better understand what it is I was trying to do. So here we are downtown Brooklyn, and you have two brothers from 2 different organizations. You have a gentleman here from the Ansar Law community, and you have a brother here from the 5% Nation. And through my photographs, I'm bringing them together, and I was able to capture this photograph right here. This is a very interesting photograph. Again, the power of carrying your camera everywhere you go. Here you have these young women in Chinatown, and you have this individual here trying to sell them what we call slum gold. I call this photograph 4 Degrees of Separation, where you have 4 people from 4 different cultures. And this is at Coney Island. And what's so interesting about it right now, the phone booths don't exist anymore. So it's very interesting here. You have a police officer, you have a gentleman here, you have a young woman here, you have this woman here, and they all separated by these different booths. This is very interesting. When I returned back to my community in Red Hook back in 1980, these are some of the first guys I started to photograph. This is a game called the Chingaling Nomads. And it's very interesting because I went there and they gave it to me. You know, this is Indio, the leader of the gang, and he died a few years ago. I think he died a horrific death. He was on his motorcycle, he got hit by a bus. But they brought me into the clubhouse and let me photograph them. And it was really interesting because I'm coming back from the army and I'm trying to reconnect with my neighborhood. And they would be the first guys I would see. And I photographed them for a few days building up this work right here. Fraternities and sororities is another body of work I've been developing over the many years. So here you have a member of the Alpha group. You got Omega here, and I brought them together. Two different fraternities, but coming together as one. This image is really profound here. You have a mosque, and you have a group of Muslim women walking by, and then you have this poster, this backdrop for a photographer, a Little Kim. So I thought it was really interesting. And here you have this masjid, and you have this photographer who's using this spot to photograph people against Little Kim. And I just thought that to be really interesting. The youth of Harlem. This is a very interesting body of work right here. These are two brothers right here. This is Cedric and this is Malik. And you know, we were coming back from DC this day, and Ced was in the military, and we on the train, and whatever reason I had my wide angle lens, and I caught this photograph right here. And these were two brothers. This is my man Malik. Malik died on my birthday this year. We grew up with each other. We've known each other since 1976, and me and Malik were really tight. You know, he went in the Marine Corps. He was a practitioner of the martial arts, Aikido Jiu-Jitsu. You know, really good friend of mine's. And whatever, something happened to him traumatic, and he passed away suddenly, you know, and it was so interesting that, you know, he died on my birthday and he got buried on his birthday. And this is a very powerful photograph right here. He had just came back from Japan, Okinawa, and I used, you know, to capture him by himself would have been a strong image, but when you have this type of background, Reaganism is black genocide, and then you have a situation with Soweto, South Africa, and even the Leonard Hearns fight, two boxers. It's a lot in this one image right here, Mother's Day. So a lot of elements. I always try to add extra stuff in my photographs to enhance it. But how profound is that you have a photograph side by side of two brothers. Malik was the oldest brother. Cedric was younger, and these brothers fought all the time. They dealt with a lot of racism. They were one of the first families to move to East Flatbush back in the days, and they had to fight every single day. And they both became proficient with their hands because of having to battle, you know, racism. And every day they fought. They went to all white schools, and every single day was a battle for them. Again, the trains. I've always found fascination with the trains. I would travel with my black and white film. The lighting was always good, so I never needed a flash. The available light was perfect. I would go with Tri-X 400 film, have my aperture open wide, and just things that you would see. I would just walk car to car looking for different things that caught my eye. This is an image that's very interesting, and I just rediscovered it after 40 years. Going through my old negatives, I came upon it. I had no memory of it whatsoever. So I got it done not so long ago, and it's such a powerful image on so many different levels. Because here you have the two young women here, but in the background you got the graffiti. And this tells so many stories at the same time, too. All these different tags. This is a very deep photograph right here. This gentleman knew me from jail. I still can't place where I knew him from, but he would go on to be a member of the Crips. And as we were having a conversation, I felt there was a really great connection between him and I, and apparently I impacted his life during his incarceration. But as we're speaking, he sees his partner here, who happens to be a blood. So I saw this as an opportunity to photograph two brothers from two different opposing gangs shaking hands. And images like this I use as teaching tools when I go into different schools to talk about gangs. Because sadly, so many of our young men are gravitating towards that way of life. In order for me to grab their attention, is these type of photographs that help me to tell the story and to show unity. And here's another album, you know. So there's just so much work here. So I'm trying to get these albums into institutions right now. This is at the Dave Chappelle Block Party in 2004 in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and it's the first time I actually photographed Kanye West performing his Jesus Walks. You have John Legend in the background. It was truly a great day in Brooklyn. Dave Chappelle brought so many talented people together. And it's the young brothers that I trained my lens on, throughout my travels. Here you got 3 young brothers from New Jersey. I believe the brother here passed away not too long ago. And I didn't know these brothers. I just saw them in my travels, and I saw a greatness in them. I saw a friendship. I saw a connection. And I would just approach the brothers and just build with them. And this is why it's important at this time to engage people. You just couldn't come and just take a person's picture. You have to have a conversation. You have to introduce yourself to them. You have to explain your intentions. And in many cases, friendships were established. This particular photograph was taken on 42nd Street. And I'm looking to reconnect with all of these photographs, with all these individuals right here. Through posting this on social media, I will learn that one passed away. But I'm really curious to publish more work, to find out what's happening with people. One of my earlier images of the guardian angels. And I'm really curious on where they're at this time. This was taken in like 1981. The early 80s. There's a lot to see with the young brothers. I was always drawn towards them because I needed their help to save our people. This work is really, it's done pretty much in a period which I like to refer to as a time before crack. A time when there was still the spirit of brotherly love. There was a time in which you could still engage people in the street and have conversations with them. This is a good brother, 2 good brothers from my neighborhood of Flatbush. In his hand is my photo album. Like I said, I always carry my album with me to draw people in. These are some young brothers I met in Jamaica, Queens. I would travel throughout the various boroughs just looking for brothers to build with. This is at Fort Greene, same situation. Good brothers that I met downtown Brooklyn. I would photograph them throughout the years. Young sister, one of my newer bodies of work in 2000. This is a part of my work on the Nation of Islam. I was greatly inspired by the work of both Leonard Freed and Gordon Parks and how they documented the nation. And I wanted to do very much the same thing. So I'll say through about 40 years, I would go to different events and just document the nation. And just like my military body of work, my work on the Nation of Islam is a body of work that has not have been shown that often. Here you have the renowned Luis Mendez and one of his students. So this is a body of work called The Teacher and the Student. Mendez has taught and inspired a lot of people over the many years. And one of the things I've done, I've documented him with all his different students. So this photograph is very important to me. And it's very interesting because here you got Lewis trying to teach him the craft. And you have this young brother that's happy. And I don't know where it went. Interesting photograph here also of a street photographer photographing a father with his son. And this image has so much meaning to it now due to the fact that Tupac is not here. And I'm looking forward to reconnecting with these young brothers right now who are probably in their 30s. Another body of work that I focused on just vehicles, to use a vehicle as a prop. My man Doodle right here from the neighborhood of East Flatbush. Very interesting young brother. He's truly talented. For whatever reason, he was drawn towards pimping. And he actually became a pimp. And he would pimp a lot of older women, which I found very interesting how this young guy was able to really pull older women and they would sell themselves for him. But he's since changed his life over. He's a man of God right now and really deep photograph. The young brothers of my neighborhood in Red Hook, when I first came home, I went after them, as I said earlier. And what's so deep about this right here, this is a young brother that I was really trying to spend a lot of time with, Kevin Sams. He got murdered, and young brother right here, Booby, he died, of mysterious causes. Very important photograph of mine because it represents the different stages of life from birth to death. And what's sad about this image is that, this is my partner's firstborn son. And there was so much hope and promise in this image. And sadly, he now made a bad mistake and he's in prison for the rest of his life. So it's just really interesting when I look at this photograph here to have been invited to witness this natural childbirth and to know that the young brother now is incarcerated. The second photograph is my man Dupreme, a young brother I've known for many years, and he has his firstborn daughter with him, downtown Brooklyn, his queen, and we've been friends ever since. So that's gone on to be a really iconic photograph. And then you have this photograph here, which is very important to me, the evolution. Flying high is what I call it. And this is when I start to really get deep into photography and understanding light and speed. So you have this young kid on a mattress flipping, and then you have a young brother here, and he was our Trayvon Martin back then. And this young brother was murdered by a security guard. And I was asked by his queen to photograph his funeral. And it's the first funeral I've ever photographed. And it's very difficult for me, but I did it. And here you have his brother that is just looking at him, and I caught that moment. So you have the evolution, you have life, you have promise, you have a struggle, and then you have death. So very important body of work of mine. Like I said, it's one of my first framed pieces. But this young kid is trying to escape that world. And it was just something about his look that stayed with me throughout my life. And I created these images before I went into corrections, but it always stayed with me. And I always wanted to find this kid, and I regretted not taking time to get to know him, to give him my card and say, brother, reach out to me. I got you. You know what I mean? In retrospect, if I can go back to this time again, I would not have gotten on the train. I would have snatched him up, and all three of them, and we would have got together. We would have got something to eat. We would have built. I would have taught him photography, and we would have been connected to this very day. But for whatever reason, I left him. So I'm haunted by this image, and I promised myself, never again, if I see a child that's going through a situation like this here, will I leave. I will make it a point to stop and build with that kid. So this is my reminder of the work that needs to be done. This image is very important to me, and it's so deep as I look at this photograph right now. You know, and this is another image, a set of images I put together to help tell a story of just fatherhood. And sadly, as we looked at this photograph, the fourth frame, this young brother just passed away. And I don't know what happened to him, but that's my good brother Zaire. And the young brother's name escapes me right now, but he just passed away last month. And I don't know what happened to him. And there's a good chance that the young brother in that picture is incarcerated. You know, so it's so many stories behind all of my photographs. With this photograph right here is really deep too, because I posted that on my Instagram page, and all three of them are doing very well. You know, all three of the kids have grown up and they reached out to me, and they have all have excelled. So there's a lot of stories to my work. I had an opportunity to work at a institution at ICP, Friends of the Island Academy, and these are some of the students, and this is given to me as a gift. And I've participated since I've retired. I've been going to ICP to teach a lot of these kids at risk. This is a program that focuses on kids that are in between incarceration, and they partner with the ICP to get them guidance and mentorship. So I've been honored for a number of years to have participated in this project, and I helped to guide a lot of these young people throughout my life. So that's very important to me. On one of my one of the covers I've gotten on the mentorship issue, which I'm really honored that they sought to focus an issue on my mentorship. So my wife came up with an idea to use two covers because they were conflicted on what cover to use. So she said, why not have two covers? So I was able to convince the publication to give me two covers, which they did. And that means a lot to me because both those pictures to me are equally as important. Let me just turn the lights on to the studio here. And this is my studio area here, where I have a lot more of my archives that I'm gathering up. And this is the album I just finished putting together not too long ago. And this vision was based off a dream right here, you know, where you have, I needed a way to address gang violence. So I had this dream of having a Blood and Crip playing chess with each other on a board there's black pieces and you can't move. You know, so in this particular photograph right here, you have one brother with the red on, brother with the blue. The red chessboard represents the bloodshed. You got black pieces, so you can't move. You know, so I call this what now? Because you can't do nothing right now. It's a stalemate. It's not even a stalemate. You can't even get involved in the game because you can't do anything. So I would always, when I would go into the school system, I would bring this particular image to show people, you know, to get their attention, and it always got their attention. This is a photograph right here of a lawyer inside a court area. You know, and that meant a lot to me because this is a cell which is a very interesting cell here. It's cell 12E3. I would put a lot of brothers in this particular cell that needed to pray. So if you wanted to pray, you wanted to use the bathroom by yourself. It was a number of cells in this area here. But imagine you in a situation when you go into court and you're in a cell with 30 individuals and you have to defecate. So what I would do, I would bring them into a private cell where brothers can go to this bathroom by themselves. If you needed to pray, I'll put you in the cell to pray. If a lawyer needed to see his client and the lawyer area was full, the visiting area, I would lend them my chair and let them talk to their client through this bar here. So this image means a lot to me. One of the saddest moments of my career was when the renowned artist Gil Scott-Heron was incarcerated, and he came to me, and I put him in this cell, and I tried to build with Gil, but at that point, Gil was a broken man. So there's an element of love again in here, you know, which is so important to me. When you see that, when you see love, you want to capture it. I called this first date, and I was leaving the park, and they was coming in the park, and I saw them, and I had to get their photograph here. He's a professor, she's a renowned sister, and this picture means a lot to me, and then they had them juxtaposed here. And we went on to become friends, and Sister Bathsheba. And this is an interesting photograph too, because I'm getting off the train and I'm seeing them and I see the love, and I would love to reconnect with them now. That's why I said that you can't go wrong when you see people that love each other. And we need to see more images of love, because we see so much hatred going on. To capture love is everything to me. This is in the jail, and this is a very interesting photograph, because I often speak about the males, but here you have a young sister, and she's a blood. She has the markings here, so she's a female blood. If I shot it in color, you will see the red beads. She's handcuffed. She's throwing up blood signs. And she's holding up Sister Soldier's book, No Disrespect. So really powerful photograph inside that same area that I mentioned before, which I worked at. Here you have a young brother, which I would love to find out where he's at now. One of my most iconic photographs. I actually have 2 frames of that. And my body work on the Nation of Islam. You know, these are 2 pioneers from what they call the first resurrection in the 1960s, and been able to just preserve that history. 2 sisters in the Nation of Islam, Sister Evelyn and Sister Shanasia. You know, my brother Malik again. And just, you know, for me, creating images that tell the story. This is a very powerful photograph for me right here. This was actually taken on a crowded street in Soho. And I saw this moment, and it just blew me away. That here the street is crowded. The dog is outside waiting for his owner. You happen to have a dog, a Dalmatian, black and white, and you have a sign that says, "No dogs allowed except for service dogs." And it's like the dog is looking at the sign. So this photograph means a lot to me, because it's unlike my portraits. It's just a spontaneous moment. Young ROTC recruits, and a combination of my new work and older work. This is a bullpen at Manhattan Criminal Court, and this pen is a cell area that houses mentally ill inmates. I spent about 10 years working this particular area right here with detainees that were severely mentally ill, pre-trial detainees. This is a very interesting photograph here. One of the rare occasions I use a wide-angle lens, and a lot of memories in the cell, from a lot of young men wanting to commit suicide to just me using my position to try to help heal a lot of young men that were incarcerated. In this particular area, I would play jazz music, I would burn incense, I would always bring reading material, because oftentimes in the jail system, they place all the mentally ill inmates in one particular area, which doesn't make sense, because you have all these different personalities. You have some that are antisocial, some that want to be around other individuals. So I created my own system to try to help heal a lot of young men. I would take some of them out of the cell and have them look out the window. Like I said, I would play the radio. I always bought reading material, and I always try to use my position to guide them. It troubles me when I think about that time, because, you know, during this day and time, they always gave them Kool-Aid. They were always heavily medicated, and it just wasn't the way. They really needed help. This is a photograph of the famous Jacob the Jeweler in Midtown, and I was asked to work on a project with Dave Chappelle. And I was able to document this moment right here. And it went on to be one of my most iconic photographs. He's known for making jewelry for a lot of the rappers. Again, the Nation of Islam. So all of these particular bodies of work now, I want to get into institutions, because I've done the work now, and I feel that the work now belongs to the people. It's out of my hands, and I want it to be preserved so I can help to preserve my legacy later on in life. And this is a powerful photograph here, because this gentleman just died not too long ago, Brother Robert. And he was a renowned barber in Brooklyn, and he died in a horrific car accident. So here you have Robert with his 2 sons. And what's interesting about this photograph here, I just met his son a few months ago, and he told me the history. You know, he's an older gentleman right now, and I took this in, I believe, 1995, and I felt good to be able to give him a copy of this picture of his father. And what a beautiful photograph of a father with his two sons. You know, love is something I'm always looking for, and connection. Here you have two Rastafarian sisters. Famous young sister photographer, Lori Lyons, an incredible photographer who did a whole series on the American flag. And some of the new work that I will find here. And what's interesting here, you have this brother I was going to school with on Brooklyn, New York City Technical College, and he has the book in his lap, Hearts of Darkness. The same book here I mentioned. He has my original copy here when I just got it, and he's actually looking at my photographs. And we're leaving college together. And what's interesting here, I got my Barnes & Noble book, and I'm sharing with him not only my photographs, but I'm also sharing his book, Hearts of Darkness, with him. This is an image I just rediscovered after 40 years going through old negatives, and I happen to see it. One of my street portraits from back in the days. Another interesting photograph here. I just rediscovered this negative after many years. It was taken in the mid-1990s, and I posted it on my Instagram page, and then someone wrote, "Rest in peace." So here you have a young woman holding on to this young man. And what's interesting about his expression, he's looking in another direction. She's leaning on him like she doesn't want him to go. And whatever reason, I was drawn to capture this moment, only to find out later on that this brother died. And I don't know how he passed away. This is a very special photograph of mine. No standing any time. And it was taken in Red Hook. And what's interesting about this photo, I'm not going to take it out of here. But you have a young boy, which represents me. You have a sign that says no standing anytime. You have the American flag and the Marcus Garvey flag. And you have my projects right here, Red Hook. And this is the park that I played in as a young kid, about the same age as him. I took this in 1995. So this picture is very important to me because I traveled the streets so many times. And this will probably be the cover of my next book because, again, it represents me at a young age discovering life around me through photography. So it's just standing at a crossroads right now of America where you have a divide going on. And as a young kid, you have to navigate this here, just like black and white America. It's world of photography. And what I learned about Gordon Parks was the range of work that he did. He did fashion, he did documentary, he did fine art. But what makes this book special is that he signed it for me. And this is when I first met him at the Museum in the City of New York. And we met him and I was able to photograph him. So book is a book that I always reference. You know, both the fashion, the black and white, the color. There's so many elements here, you know, that I was drawn to. You know, I often speak about his relationship with Red, because Gordon not only photographed individuals, but he created a connection with them. And this is a young gang member out of Harlem called Red. Picture was taken around 1945, and they developed a friendship. And Gordon mentored him, brought him to his home. And Red was a troubled man, but Gordon overlooked that and just tried to guide him and maintain a relationship with him over the many years. And this is Red involved in a gang fight in Harlem. So this work kind of like inspired me to photograph gangs as well. And here you have Red Jackson looking at one of his friends that got murdered. Very powerful photograph that Gordon did. That's the work that really drew me in. And again, it's fashion. I was greatly inspired by a lot of this here. Even when I do my fashion shoots now, I reference Gordon's work. Let me show you the picture that I was asked to reference. And I have to say it was one of the high points of my career. You know, his documentation of poverty. You have the Fontanella family that he documented extensively to show the hardships of poverty in Harlem. Again, his work on the Nation of Islam, which is very instrumental in my work. And here we go, I believe. The picture's coming up. And this is a photograph that I was asked to mirror right here. So you have Elvis Cleveland and his wife Kathleen. So when Culture Magazine asked me to do it, it was truly an honor. You know, so this is my rendition of it. And I have the magazine here. And it was the first time they were ever photographed together. So that makes it really special for me to have been invited to photograph. And it's not often I get a chance to do it. And here's the actual hardcover. And what I wanted to do was something really different. You know, not only did I want to photograph them, but I wanted to create something that was iconic in my own style. So I incorporated an element that's in a lot of my work now. And I realized I had some tear sheets in here, so this is some of my fashion work as well. But what's in here is very special to my heart. And this was just done a few years ago. Here's one photograph right here. So what I did, I bought Gordon's book, A Choice of Weapons, to the photo shoot, and I incorporated it in here. And Swiss just immediately held it up to his eye. And I thought that was incredible, you know, to keep Gordon's memory alive. And let me see what we have here. And you have Peter Conhart, the founder of the Gordon Parks Foundation, Alicia and Sarah. You know, she's the editor of the publication. And let me see what we have here. So that was one of the highlights of my career, to create this particular body of work. Here it is. And this is the spread right here. So again, I used the books that are actually right here too, you know, so I used them as props. And what was so deep, Swiss was reading the book. It just wasn't a hole in the book. He was actually reading the book. And I was able to capture this intimate moment right here. And again, they have the photograph here as a reference. And what's so deep about the sweater that Alicia's wearing, I had that mock neck for since the 80s, the early 80s, and she put it on. So I still have that here right now. So this is a tribute to Gordon, and then this is what I want to add to it. And I did this with Dapper Dan as well. And I have them reading books. So, you know, it's one thing to have a photograph, but to keep Gordon's legacy alive, I brought both my books with me, and I incorporate them in the photo shoot. So this photograph means the world to me. You know, it was one of the greatest shoots of my career. And this is special, you know. And you have the photograph right here. Very important photograph to me. This camera belongs to Luis Mendez. And I wanted to create something special. Being that we were dealing with the science of photography, I thought it was only right that I have Alicia hold up a camera. She's accustomed to holding up a mic or playing the piano, but to have her hold up a camera, something that she's not accustomed to doing, it took it to a whole nother level for me. So this is one of my favorite photographs. Really, both these images are very dear to my heart. This was again, and that's actually my vest.